So we'll talk about politics and criminal justice. We talked about it a little bit just a second ago. But with politics and criminal justice, it's there, it permeates the field. And like I mentioned a minute ago, there are good and bad politics in criminal justice. So we have three strikes laws. These were generated by a political need to protect constituents. I talked about those three strikes laws in class a little bit. But with these three strikes laws, these politicians felt the need to protect their constituents, and so they set the law to put somebody into prison for 25 years to life if they committed a felony, a third felony. So here's kind of examples of how it permeates. So you have lawmakers who are politicians because they're elected to their office. They generate the laws and policies within the system. I talked to you in class a little bit about the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Bureau of the Department of Homeland Security, and how the legislature said it's illegal for you to come into the United States under certain circumstances, and we're going to vest in ICE the responsibility of deciding how they're going to take care of that, right? So they enacted a law saying to protect the country, we're going to say that you can't come into the country under these circumstances. And we're going to say this is how immigration needs to take care of it. So lawmakers affect our criminal justice system politically by a lot. But we also have these lawmakers who appropriate funds to pay for the system. I'm a police officer. I work for the government. I mean, granted, I don't, whenever you think government, you think United States government. But I work for the city. But even as an employee of the city, it is a political governmental subdivision, and I work for the government. And the thing is since I work for the government, they have to pay me because I work. And where does that money come from? Well, obviously it comes from the taxpayers, but it's up to the politicians to appropriate how much funding they're going to allocate to paying my paycheck or to paying my health benefits or retirement or whatever. They have to allocate funds to the sheriff at the county level to pay for the jail and for warrant service and for judges and courts and all of that. So politics affects the money. And then we have the political strata, but it's also part of the checks and balances because the lawmakers are part of the legislative branch of the government. Law enforcement is part of the executive branch of the government. And then we have the judiciary. And some of our, if you look at it, here in the last couple of years, President Trump has appointed, I believe it's 2 new justices to the United States Supreme Court. So those justices are political appointees, and then they are also approved on the advice of the Senate, who are all elected officials from each of the 50 states. So there's a checks and balances there because the president can't just say, I want to appoint this guy to be a justice on the United States Supreme Court for the rest of his life without some manner of check and balance. And so that's why those political appointments only exist on the advice and consent of the Senate, which is the elected representatives from each state. So again, it permeates the field. We have our city councils and commissions who effectively act as the legislature at the city level. We have chiefs of police who are political appointees. because they're either appointed by the city commission or council, or they're appointed by the city manager, who is appointed by the city commission or council. We have sheriffs who are elected to their positions. We have city judges who here in Kansas are appointed to their positions. We have county judges in some states who are elected or appointed. And then there are state judges like we have here in Kansas, where we have judges like Judge Peterson or judicial magistrates who are appointed or elected by the counties that they serve in. We have federal judges who, like I mentioned with President Trump and the Supreme Court appointees, federal judges are appointed the same way, even for like the federal district of Kansas over in Wichita, at that federal district court. That judge is a political appointee by the president who is approved on the advice and consent of the Senate, same as if he or she were to be appointed to the United States Supreme Court. Let's talk about the process, how people get through the system. So an offense is committed, then law enforcement is called to investigate. We refer the case to the prosecutor. The prosecutor will hold a first appearance or a preliminary hearing in grand jury to determine if probable cause continues to exist for the charge to bind them over for trial. And then we'll move to the adjudication process, which involves arraignment, which is to say that after the preliminary hearing and or the grand jury process, the charges that the court finds probable cause to exist for are officially read to the defendant, and they make a plea of guilty, not guilty, or no contest, and then we proceed to trial or sentencing based on their plea. At sentencing, we conduct pre-sentence investigations to determine any enhancing or aggravating factors, and to determine any mitigating factors. Then the judge will take those under consideration and sentence the defendant appropriately. And then if there are any issues in how the verdict or sentence were reached, then the case will proceed to the appeals process. And eventually we end up in corrections, where they go to prison, or they will end up on community corrections, probation, something like that, or in prison until they are paroled. So this here is an infographic of the process through the criminal justice system. I believe this is located in your book. You can find it pretty much anywhere on the internet. You can click in here and zoom it in where you open up the actual PowerPoint slides, but it's there for you. So we have the wedding cake model here that describes our layers of cases. So the bulk of cases are that large layer at the bottom, the misdemeanors. Then we have our lesser felonies like burglary or something. Then we have our serious felonies like murder or rape. And then you have the celebrated cases like the O.J. Simpson murder or the Kobe Bryant rape case, things like that. So I'm going to stop here, and then we'll talk about ethics in another video.